Okay, today we're in our book, Fairy Tales for Bedtime.
Fairy Tales Poop Time.
Hey, we don't make poop jokes, right? Yeah. Fairy Tales for Bedtime. It's not bedtime yet, but these are still classic stories that we like to read. And Ingrid has chosen Cinderella. Let's start. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful young girl named Ella, but everyone called her Cinderella. Because while the rest of her family slept in soft feather beds, she had to huddle by the fireplace in the kitchen and wake covered in ash and cinders. Cinderella's mother had died years before, and her father, who was rarely home, had married again. His new wife made Cinderella scrub and sweep and cook and clean, but she lavished every luxury on her own two girls, who were as ugly as Cinderella was beautiful. One day, an invitation arrived which made Cinderella's stepmother shriek with excitement. "The prince is holding a ball," she cried, "and we're invited." At once, she and her daughters began discussing dresses and shoes and how to impress a prince. "Please, may I go too?" begged Cinderella. "You?" laughed her stepmother. "Just look at you, covered in cinders like a kitchen maid. They'd never let you into that palace." Over the following days, Cinderella's stepmother summoned the most fashionable dressmakers and hairdressers to make the ugly sisters look slightly less ugly. It wasn't easy. Finally, the big night arrived. The sisters and their mother left in a swish of finery, and Cinderella was alone in an empty house. "I wish I could go to the ball," she sighed. Hardly had the words left her lips than there was a tap at the door. There stood an old lady leaning on a silver stick. Cinderella had never seen her before, but she seemed to know Cinderella. "Hello, dear," she said. "I'm your fairy godmother, and you shall go to the ball. First, you need a coach. Can you bring me a pumpkin?" Cinderella was too astonished to ask why. She ran to pick a pumpkin from the garden. Her godmother waved the stick. There was a shower of stars so bright that Cinderella had to blink. When she looked again, the pumpkin had become a round golden coach. She gasped. "Now the coachman and horses," her godmother went on. "I think you'll find a lizard and 4 mice in the garden." Another wave, and there was a coachman dressed all in green and 4 handsome white horses. "And your dress," she added. With a final wave, Cinderella's ragged old clothes became a glittering ball gown with delicate glass slippers sparkled on her feet. Cinderella spun around in delight. "Oh, thank you, godmother," she cried. "Now remember," said her godmother as Cinderella stepped into the golden coach, "my magic will wear off at midnight. You must leave before then." "I will," promised Cinderella. The palace was ablaze with lights when Cinderella arrived. As she entered, a hush fell. No one had ever seen anyone so beautiful. Shyly, the prince came over and asked her to dance. Cinderella's glass slippers tinkled lightly on the dance floor as she and the prince whirled and twirled together. They were having so much fun, she almost forgot her godmother's warning until a clock began to strike. "Midnight," she gasped.
Look.
She gathered up her skirts and dashed for the door. "Don't go," called the prince, racing after her, but he was too late. She had vanished, except for one sparkling glass slipper. Gently, he picked it up. "I'm going to find the girl who fits this," he announced boldly, "and then I'm going to ask her to marry me." The very next day, the prince and his servants carried the slipper from house to house. Everyone tried it, from haughty princesses to humble housemaids, but it would fit no one. Cinderella's ugly sisters tried it too, but their feet were far too big and clumpy. Then a shy, cinder-covered figure stepped forward. "It can't be hers," sneered the sisters. She wasn't even at the ball. I want everyone to try, insisted the prince, gazing hopefully at the girl. Was it his imagination, or was there something familiar about her? He held his breath as, daintily, she lifted her foot. The slipper was a perfect fit. I knew I'd find you, he cried joyfully, sweeping Cinderella into his arms. My prince, she laughed, hugging him right back. At the moment, there was a tap at the door. It was Cinderella's fairy godmother. Time for a little more magic, she said with a smile. She waved her wand, and Cinderella's dusty dress was transformed into a dazzling wedding gown, and there was a golden coach to carry the smiling couple back to the palace, where they lived happily ever after. Cinderella's stepmother and sisters were less happy. It's all your fault, the stepmother grumbled at her daughters for having such big feet. That was the end. Cinderella.
Now, that one's